Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Kenny. I'm one of our study abroad ambassadors. And thank you all for coming and or watching this later. This panel is basically of three volunteers and myself. We're just going to be answering a few questions collected by students, current students at West. And before we start, I would just like everyone to introduce themselves in terms of your name, class year, major, and where you went abroad. And I can start. I'm a senior. I am an AFAM major with a concentration in anthropology. And I went to Trinidad and Tobago in the spring. And I guess I can go in order. Gabby, you want to go?
Hi, I'm Gabby Bennett. I graduated in 2020. I studied psychology, classics, and education studies. And what was the other thing we're supposed to? Oh, and I studied abroad in Athens, so the CYA program,
Cool.
Athens, Greece.
I think the next person I see is Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm a senior and I'm majoring in Earth and Environmental Science, and I went abroad to Tanzania.
Cool.
Hi, I'm Anna Sophie. I graduated in 2020. I studied government international relations and data analysis, and I studied abroad in Berlin with the Duke in Berlin program.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm so excited to hear about all of those places. You guys are the only people I know who went to each of those places. Um, so yeah, I'm sure our audience is really excited to hear too. One of the questions they asked was, what are some of the assumptions, or what were some of the assumptions you had before you went? And how were they debunked or corrected, like at the end of your experience or by the end? And in terms of order, it doesn't really matter. Whoever wants to answer first could just go ahead.
Okay, I can start. So, like I said, I went to Athens, Greece, and I think an assumption that I had was, like how they try and prepare you for culture shock and everything, but also Greece has this reputation of being like so welcoming and hospitable and things like that. So I was I like figured that there would be like a culture shock and like an adjustment period, but I wasn't like aware of how intense it would be. And so once I got there, it was very intense, especially because like I'm a Black female. I was only Black female in my program, and like there weren't a lot of Black females in Greece. And so that was like a really hard transition for me. And I definitely think that that's something I would caution a lot of POC, especially Black women, Black men, when they're looking into their study abroad experience, is to just really try and study that and like talk with people in the study abroad office about what POC experiences are like while in that country.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to go next?
Sure, I can say a few things. So I think the biggest, and I talked to some of my friends who are in the program as well, and some of the biggest things to expect are that one, the city is a lot bigger than you expect it to be, and it's Berlin, Germany. It's not as dense as some of the big cities in the United States, but it's really sprawling, so it can take a long time to get from place to place. And since you're in homestays, a lot of your friends will be scattered around the city. So like one far end of the city to the other would take like an hour and a half on public transportation. Um, that being said, the public transportation is excellent, and that's something that surprised me. Um, there are trains that come every 10 minutes. They're always on time. It's not super crowded, and the program covers the cost of it, which is great. Another big thing that I was surprised about was how many people spoke English in Berlin. Um, a lot of people, if you try to speak German to them, will hear your accent and just automatically switch to English. So it could be kind of hard to learn the language that way. But if you tell them that, you want to practice your German, then they'll be willing to accommodate that. But that was something that really surprised me. And then the other thing is that um, it's less expensive than you would think for the capital city. Like particularly groceries are pretty cheap. especially like fresh food, which is really nice. And also, there are a ton of restaurants that are really cheap. And yeah, so those are the biggest things.
Cool. Thanks, Anna.
I think one thing that was, I guess, kind of unexpected / hard for me was my broad experience was mostly people who were white, and we were going obviously to Tanzania, and I think there's obviously issues of like cultural appropriation and other things that I obviously want to be extremely like mindful of and sensitive to. Um, but there is kind of like it was just didn't want to be, like white savior kind of program, but there's some aspects of my program that I think people weren't as sensitive to. And I think that was hard for me to kind of grapple with because I wanted to be respectful of the culture, but also it's hard to explain, but I guess I think it was the cultural appropriation with some members of my group that was really challenging and something that I think the program could do better about going into it. And it was, but a lot of stuff I learned about having those kind of conversations with people. So yeah.
Thank you. I actually had a similar, I guess, relationship to cultural appropriation in Trinidad and Tobago too, because a lot of the things I noticed that Americans get uncomfortable about, they particularly don't care about. So it's like you have to kind of walk a line of like maintaining your own integrity while not overstepping and like telling other people how to like run their own culture, you know?
Right. Part of it for me was I'm coming in and like having these ideas of what I think is like wrong, yet like that culture itself is not telling me necessarily that it's like wrong or bad. But then yeah, it's definitely like a fine line, I feel like, too. And I had to obviously like recognize my own like privilege and everything in that. But yeah.
Okay, thank y'all for those answers. Another question from one of our students was about whether you stayed on campus or was it a homestay? And how did that positively or negatively impact your experience abroad?
I guess we can go in the same order again. So I chose to do like an apartment stay. So I had roommates, it was me and three other girls. I chose that because with the homestay, you have no idea what kind of situation you're walking into. And so it could be a really great experience to really immerse yourself in the culture. But I also think that when you stay on your own, like you have the opportunity to do it at your own pace, which can be helpful, especially if you're like maybe not in the best headspace. So like if you're going abroad to really get away from some things and just find some clarity and like at the same time immerse yourself in new culture, I think like having the opportunity to like take it a little bit at a time and then just also like have some space to yourself is really valuable, or at least it was for me. Um, and also, like I was saying before, racially speaking, you have no idea what kind of situation you're walking into. And I had heard experiences where people had homestays where they were really bad racial encounters and they had to like get a new place to stay. So that was just like something I also had to keep in mind, which is like if I'm in an apartment, like that's less of an issue for me. So yeah, that's why I did it. And there were times where I wish that I could have done a homestay because my Greek would have gotten so much better, so much faster, because that's how I would have communicated with my family. But at the same time, I just thought like risk reward wise, I just put in more effort personal, like on my own time learning Greek, and then stayed in an apartment and tried to get closer to the people in my program.
Cool. Yeah, you wanted to control your environment a little bit. Thank you.
Yeah, because there's so much you're just walking into when you're abroad, and it's good to have an open mind, but also I think it's important to have a bit of self-awareness, knowing what you can handle, especially when you're away for such a long period of time.
Yeah, I totally agree with a lot of the things that you said. The program that I did, I think pretty much everyone does a homestay. I actually got an exemption. So I stayed in an apartment that I rented. But most people do homestays, and I don't think they usually allow the exemptions. But you can kind of select what kind of homestay you want to have. So there's a pretty involved form that you fill out about, you know, about yourself, about your interests, about what you want in a homestay. So, you know, some people wanted to have like a really strong family experience and wanted to be really involved in their homestay. And then other people wanted more independence and to be able to do what they wanted and go where they wanted at all times. So there, it was pretty flexible, and people had all kinds of different homestays, and they could switch if they wanted to. But I think it's stuff at the end of the day, it's a personal decision. And I think there are pros and cons, especially with the language learning. But yeah.
Cool, thank you.
My program had its own kind of little campus, so we didn't really, there was a lot of separation between us and the town that we were in. So that was definitely, there were upsides and obviously downsides, like you both were also saying, to having that kind of isolated space. But yeah, that was how my program did it.
Okay. Yeah, I was on campus at the university that we were taking classes at, and the cohort that did the same Trinity program all got paired up into roommate like rooms, and we were all in the same hall and everything. So it was like on top of the fact that we stood out so much as Americans, was kind of like we didn't really get the full, like, I guess, benefit of staying on campus. Like, we didn't make that many friends like on campus. Like, the friends I made like outside of my cohort were like people that were still affiliated with Trinity in some way. Like, it wasn't like that easy to kind of just, but I mean, we did, but they were like the only like people that went out of their way to really talk to us, because I think that it's not really emphasized that much how much you stand out like once you're abroad as an American. Um, so yeah, campus wasn't really that, like, I can't really say that I was that immersed in like student life in Trinidad, and I know how it feels to like be a student in that space, because I was always around other Americans all the time. But I still would have probably preferred that to a homestay. Um, yeah, for my own reasons, I guess. My next question is about challenges. Like, I really liked hearing people's answers in the panel that I was in a couple of days ago, and I was just curious to know like what was something really challenging that you experienced abroad, and it could be like mild or whatever. Like, for me, I talked about how the insurance that came with acceptance into the program didn't cover optical um, costs. So like when I broke my glasses right before carnival, like, and I couldn't see, I could not just get them replaced super easily. Um, so that's just something that I was not really prepared for, and it was a little challenging. So I was just curious to know what were like a few things that just came up that were like really. I also got lost like in the capital and my phone was dead. So, and I had to like rely on a stranger to show me like where I could take a cab back to campus, stuff like that. Like, I was just curious to know about some inconveniences or challenges that you guys dealt with.
So again, I'll start in this order. Like I was saying before, racially, like that was definitely the biggest challenge for me. Just like you, because I like am born and raised in America, I know how racism and misogyny works here, but that is not an American phenomenon. That's like a global phenomenon. And so just like having to readjust to how it works in different places because it still exists. It just plays out in different ways. So sometimes it's way more overt. And like Rebecca was saying, there's certain things that people in their culture don't find offensive, but to you, it's very offensive. And so having to deal with that and then also explain to a person, hi, like I'm really hurt when you say these types of things to me because it means this in my culture, even though for them it's just like, oh, I heard it in a rap song, it must be cool. So like that kind of thing was really challenging. um I would say that I went out of my way to try and like integrate myself in Greek culture. So I tried to hang out with people in my program, but I used like online dating apps to like meet people in Greece. And that was the way that I like really connected with a lot of locals. They'd be like, oh, like we're going to this club, or oh, like this neighborhood has a lot of like African immigrants. So like if you're interested in learning more about like the Black community in Greece, like you should come here, hang out with this. Like my family's doing this thing. So that was really helpful. But again, also challenging because it's like we're sharing a Black identity, but at the same time, it's so different. So it was really hard to find like a true connection. And I was never a person that was like homesick, but that was a time where I was just like, I miss Louisiana hot sauce. I miss orange cheese. I miss Black American people. I miss home and things like that. And I miss not being shouted at like Black person over there and like traffic stopping because I'm walking on the street. Like I just miss kind of being incognito, I guess, if that makes sense.
That
So it
was
was
like my
super,
experience in Italy.
it's very challenging. And people will literally like stop, like if you're walking on the street, they will stop eating and stare at you or like shout out at you and think it's perfectly fine. So it's just very aggressive. Or and also like older people just based off their generation, like you can hear them talking about you in Greek like in the grocery store, and they don't know that you understand them because they think you're just some American that like would never bother to learn a language. But like things like that were like hurtful and challenging, but at the same time that's a whole part of like culture shock experience. So those are things I would definitely keep in mind as you're thinking about the countries that you're going to abroad and how long you're staying there.
Thank you, Gabby.
So, so one of the challenges at first was the fact that I was the only Wesleyan student there, and everyone else went to Duke, and they all knew each other already. It ended up being, yeah, and I mean, it ended up being fine because I met like a few people that I really liked, and so that, I mean, it wasn't a big deal, but it was a little bit stressful at first, just because it was kind of like trying to seek people out in that group. And otherwise, one of the other challenging things was just that the program doesn't do a great job of really like connecting you with people outside the program. So it is like pretty hard to meet locals unless you're really doing the work yourself and seeking that out. And that limited exposure wasn't like the best part of the program, I don't think, because we kind of just like stuck together as a group of Americans and didn't really like reach out as much, or not everyone did, but some people did. So that was probably, yeah, those are some of the challenges.
Thank you.
I would say there were kind of two main challenges for me from my program. The first was being queer abroad in a country where it's illegal. So that was a bit tough sometimes just because I couldn't, obviously talk about anything, and there was kind of a targeting of Americans, and punishment is pretty severe. Of course, that was just like I had to not talk about it, which isn't that difficult to do, but it did feel like a bit of, um, feeling like it's wrong for some reason. Um, and also just like putting other people in danger. Like if I said something, I could put all these people who are in my program and also just like the community in jeopardy. So that is something that was a bit challenging at times to feel um, like secure in it, but also like secure within myself about it, but not, like ever talk about it, or only talk about it obviously with in like private and kind of stuff like that. So that was kind of something to navigate. The other challenging thing was just that my program was really strict, and I think the overall program thought that like the country we were in was for some reason dangerous and whatever, so we could never leave without someone else. And when we left with someone else, we had to like tell someone exactly where we were going, and it's a very small like rural town, so you can't exactly like go out to bars or anything. Not that that's like a huge thing to give up, but it was just like I did feel like at a summer camp, like 8 years old, as opposed to like being in my 20s and like very capable in the country being or at least the town being quite safe. So that was something I found kind of frustrating about the particular program.
Okay.
If
Yeah.
I could add off of that,
Oh,
oh,
please
sorry.
do.
Yeah, my program was pretty similar in that way, even though we were like right in the middle of Athens, like downtown metropolis type of center. They were pretty strict, and that was just like kind of a cultural thing that people had to get used to. So when you're used to how like things go at Wesleyan to where you can literally wear whatever you want at any time of day, to having the head of the program like yell at you for like wearing shorts and saying that like basically whatever happens to you, you will deserve it because you're wearing shorts, is like it's a huge adjustment to make. And knowing that that's the mentality of people, knowing that if something happened to you, like people would find some way to say, well, what were you doing? It was just like things like that. Those are things that like I wish people talked more about their broad experience instead of saying it changed my life. It's like there are these challenges like you really have to keep in mind because you're living there for a really long time. And also, especially because I was a student who was working all the time while at school, like had a bunch of jobs and stuff like that. So I was used to having income and paying for things. And even though I didn't have to like pay my tuition anymore because my financial aid covered it, I still had living expenses. And I was so used to having a check come in. It was an adjustment to like live off of, this is all the money you have for this period of time, and you're not going to make any more money until you get back to the States. So just learning how to manage that big chunk and knowing how you're going to spend it for that period of time was very challenging.
Yeah, I don't know how I completely forgot about the clothes thing too. That was a thing for us, and it was not something I expected at all, just because like Trinidad and Tobago is known for like carnival, and that's not something where people have a lot of clothes on at, but like they compartmentalize it a lot. So like it's just not appropriate to like wear a dress or shorts or anything like that to class. Like everyone is in like a sweater and jeans, even though it's like 80 degrees. And they would just look at me like I'm crazy like all the time. Like these are the clothes I brought because I'm coming to like the Caribbean, like hello. But like I remember we went on a tour and my friend Charlene wasn't allowed to walk into the it was like a chapel or something. Like they made her stand outside while the rest of us were in there. Like it was just a really big deal. And yeah, I think that's something that I guess people should maybe like look into, like what are the like standards, like how conservative is like the population in terms of like the workday and like school appropriate like attire and stuff like that. And no one would like say anything, but like you get really, really like aggressive stares on campus. Um, so yeah.
The dirty looks I got in Greece, it was 70 degrees and somebody was wearing like a coat with like a fur hood. And I'm wearing like, a jumpsuit because it's like summery weather. It's sunny in Greece and it's 70s. And then like this group of people downtown are looking at me like, and I'm just like, it's warm out, but and they're like, we don't understand like how you Americans are always wearing shorts. Or like one time it was 45 degrees and windy and they canceled classes because of weather. And they're like, we've never had a winter like this. And meanwhile, like I'm from Chicago and it was like negative 50 like that same week. So like it's just like things like that are good to keep in mind. And we talk about culture shock when people are preparing to go abroad, but like I wish that people were a little bit more specific about what culture shock means and like how that's going to feel like on an everyday basis. So, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
that's a good
actually
point.
really interesting to hear about that, because in Berlin, which is like not even that far away from Greece, it's it's a very, I mean, the program was extremely independent. You were basically on your own if you weren't in class. It was like Wesleyan, like you just show up at class and the rest of your time is your time. And it's a really a city with a strong history of counterculture. There's not there's I mean, I saw police once the entire time I was there. You can do basically whatever you want. I felt safe walking around. The crime level is very low. You can wear whatever you want. Um, like people are walking around naked in the street sometimes, like as an art thing, like painting themselves. Like it's a very free city. So, and that was one of the things that I really liked about that city, because the possibilities are endless. There's like all kinds of things that you could do there, all kinds of different like performances and art. And it was, it was really exciting just because it was so like such a liberated city, I guess.
Yeah, that does sound cool. Um, does anyone else have anything to add in terms of like challenges? Okay, our next question is about like how your experience differed to that of your friends at West, who went to more common programs.
Um, so a lot of my friends like went to Denmark and like had the time of their life, or like Spain or Italy and things like that. And they talked about like how amazing it was and how that program changed them forever, and like everything was so great and stuff. And I think that the thing that was different was they had a really strong Wesleyan network. Um, that might be it, but also I don't know. I just wouldn't say that my program was like the best thing that ever happened to me in my life, if that makes sense. Like, I'm so grateful that I went, and I'm very appreciative of the opportunity and understand I'm super blessed and all of that. But I wouldn't say that it was like a fairy tale dream come true. Whereas, like, that's kind of how I feel like a lot of people talk about abroad when they get back to us. Um, I definitely think that my abroad experience really prepared me and got me back into the mindset of finishing out Wesleyan strong. So I went my junior spring, and it was very much a reset. So I was away from a lot of things on campus. I got to do classes at a bit of a slower pace abroad and just kind of be in a new environment, think more about like the things that I wanted once I finished college and stuff like that. And so part of me like wishes I was around like Wesleyan people because that would have been more fun. But at the same time, I think it really helped me reset, refocus, and just like finish out college so much stronger and like in a much better headspace than how I was like the year or so before I left. Because I didn't really have that network to rely on. I was kind of like on my own for the first time, like in a really long time, because our breaks are short. We come back, we see each other, things like that. It goes back to the same cycle. Being apart from that just gave me a new perspective, and I found it to be very helpful. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, thank you.
So same thing, like there weren't any other Wesleyan students. I was really lucky to be able to, find the program was pretty small, but I was lucky in that I was able to find some really close friends that um that really like made the experience for me. I think, if you're in a group where you don't know anyone and you don't really get along with anyone, it's definitely it's going to be difficult. And that's something to think about, if you're the kind of person who wants just like the kind of like safety net of having like other Wesleyan people around or not. Another thing that was actually kind of difficult was getting the courses to transfer. I don't know, like a lot of people's courses kind of like automatically went to their transcript, but there was a lot of like paperwork and requests and stuff involved with that at the end, which is like a little bit frustrating. So you're definitely going to have to be on that if you go outside the Wesleyan programs, like making sure you're getting your right classes and they're transferring over to Wesleyan how you need them to. So yeah.
And going off of that, because I had the same issue, and I know a lot of people who did, you can go through all the channels, CC all the deans, all the people who are like supposed to be over the courses, and still not get it approved, or still get one class come back as like zero point 0.5 credits. So be ready for that, and just make sure that you have like enough cushion room to like finish out your graduating credits, so that if that happens to you, you're not completely done, if that makes sense. So
I would say the major differences between my program and my friends is that kind of similar to Gabby, but my friends pretty much all went to the Wesleyan program. well, I guess Denmark isn't, but the Wesleyan program in Madrid and Paris. And though there are some major differences, obviously like language is one, but like I think their experiences were more or less kind of an extension of their life at Wesleyan, with like exceptions of spending more money, drinking a lot more, and like, like partying a ton. Like yeah, it was just a lot different. Like, for example, drinking in like the particular town in Tanzania, they really emphasize that we shouldn't drink too much to get too drunk, because it's like seeing Americans super drunk is kind of like and just being drunk in like that culture is viewed as like really like you have no life and you are kind of just, I don't know. But so it was just a different situation, obviously. So um I would say mine like pushed me in a lot of ways that I think was great for me. But the freedom of like going places and doing a lot of independent stuff was not as prevalent in my program for sure. But that's obviously something I chose, and I think it was a good experience regardless.
Thank you.
I like to go off of that too, if I can.
Yeah,
Sorry,
please.
I keep talking.
No, please. It's fine.
Yeah, I definitely say that how people approach drinking culture is different in other countries. And I know that that's definitely something that people talk about before you go abroad. But I was definitely a person who like did not want to be like a shameful, embarrassing American, like super drunk, because like that was looked down upon. But also like there were people in my program who like took pride in being that. So just like, and sometimes I just like wanted to distance myself from people in my program because I didn't want to be associated in that way. So that was like another, I guess, challenging factor of like, I don't know, I feel kind of isolated out here. And maybe if I was with my West friends, maybe I would have like I have no idea what I would have done like in that moment, but that was super different. And also like going out when you're going to clubs like in America, like it's fine to like be wild and drink and like dance and stuff. But in Greece, like you go to the club to look cute and that's it. Like you're not dancing. Like, and anyone who was dancing, it was just like, do they need to be taken home? Are they drunk? And they could be perfectly sober, but it's just that like their culture just wasn't like, they didn't really, I don't wanna say they didn't like that, but it was just like kind of looked down upon. It's just like, why are you being like this? So yeah, I would just think about that too. Cause people were like, I'm gonna go clubbing and do all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but you're still gonna get like crazy looks for doing it. So that was another thing. That was an adjustment, I'd say.
I personally was a little jealous of like my friends who were in Madrid and got to like take the subway everywhere and like visit France and then come back and like do all of it. Like like I was in a city sort of, well, I was very close to the city. I was really close to Port of Spain, which is the capital. But we would take Ubers everywhere. Like we never, like I was just not, I probably took a maxi cab like one time by myself to get my hair done, and I was on Google Maps the whole time. I was so scared I was gonna like get off of the wrong, like I was just not trying to do that often, but I wanted to try it at least one time, so I did it once. But I did not take public transportation often, and I feel like I missed out on like that. But it was a lot easier for like my friends in Spain to just like take the subway everywhere and like meet people in the city, like locals, just because they were in much more of like an urban or like metropolitan area. So I think that's the main, or not the main, my program was very different, but that's the only thing that I was kind of jealous of, in terms of like my friends who went to more common programs. And the next question is about like your main pros and your main cons of your programs, like things that you really loved and things you learned, that you took with you, and things that were just like your main cons that you wished were different.
For pros, I'll say I love the weather, like 45 and windy and you cancel school. That was great. Um, I also liked the food, but a con I say was I wish there was a little bit more diversity. So like Greek food is nice, but to have it from like January till May. Like sometimes it's like, okay, like I really miss Popeyes. Like I just miss certain things, but that's like to be expected. Like you're gonna miss stuff from home. Another pro I'd say was just the pace of life was a lot slower. So I think that's why I had such a refreshed mindset and I felt so good coming back because I don't there wasn't just this pressure that you have like back here in America where it's like your identity is tied to like your productivity and like what job you have, what career you have. Like that's not where your value is tied. Like for the most part, like there were people who I would like be friends with in Greece and I wouldn't even know what job they had. And like I didn't care. Like we didn't ask each other that stuff. We got to know each other as people. And I really liked that. And that made me really happy. And I try to like take that back here with me in America, like try to kind of step away from the mindset of people, their value is like what they do in society or whatever, and like how productive they are. And things just feel super transactional here in America, whereas there it's so much more familial and their homeless population is so low because families like aren't really as broken up and like people won't really let their family on the street and things like that. So it just felt very warm and welcoming in that way. But the cons, like I've been saying this entire call, like the racism and the misogyny and the stare culture and the grabbing and catcalling and things like that were all very aggressive and new. And especially when you're by yourself, that was challenging. And when you don't have other people in your program that look like you or think like you, things like that, it's hard to also like explain it and be afraid and like process what happened. So those I'd say were the cons. But overall, I'm really glad that I went and had that learning experience. Yeah.
So the pros for my program, definitely the main things that the program is extremely well organized. They've been running it for years. The classes are really great and the teachers are excellent. And I mean, you have access to all kinds of stuff since you're officially enrolled as a student at one of two universities in Berlin. So, I mean, your medical, dental, optic, all of that is covered through the university. Um, you also have access to like different sports teams if you want to do that, or like there are different facilities that you can use. Like if you want to go swimming or take a dance class or something like that, you can do that. They will provide you internship opportunities if you want to do that. I think that's if you stay longer, but there's that option. Um, you also have like a ton of discounts, student discounts around the city. And then one of the main things is that the program takes you on a ton of excursions. So, I mean, they take you to like the opera, the symphony, they take you to all of the main museums. Um, they also will take you on a trip to Prague and Dresden, which is really fun and great. And they also do like a language partner program. If you want to find like a partner to practice your German with, you can do that too. So there's just like a lot of resources and a lot of activities and things that they cover for you. They pay for your public transportation, all of that. So it's really, there's a lot of support there, a lot of resources. And that's like one of the best things about the program because, the main guy who's been running it like forever, he knows he can answer all your questions. He can help you however you need. And it was really nice to have that support there. I think the main cons were, one of them was it was difficult to, because the program was pretty structured, you couldn't really leave on the weekends if you wanted to. And the prices for flights out of Berlin's airport particularly are like extremely cheap, like $20 for a flight to a different country. So it was a little bit harder to travel than some of the other programs that I've heard about. And also everybody spread out around the city because of homestays, which was not ideal at times. And another con was the limited exposure to locals. But overall, like mostly pros.
Okay, thank you.
I would say the main pros for my program was that it's academically pretty rigorous. We did a research project at the end where like my grader group might have discovered like a brand new gecko species, and the little nerdy environmental science person in me was very excited about that. So yeah, just like got to have a lot of like cool research experience in the field. Um, and just like the landscape of Tanzania differs dramatically from that of Connecticut, and in I think a really good way, and it's just really beautiful. So that was a huge pro, and also like lots of excursions all the time. So that was really cool. And I would say the people in my program, because we were isolated and we're on our little campus, even though there's a lot of cons to that, we also got really close. So that was a nice part of the program. And then I would say the main cons I've already kind of spoken to, but not super like immersive in the culture. There was no homestays and just being super strict. And yeah, that was something I chose, but it, those were cons to it for sure.
Mhm. I would say my cons were, well, my only real con was just like inconvenience because I'm so used to like, I think Americans are very used to things just being like this. Like, I don't like long lines and like things being done manually instead of through a computer and stuff like that. So that was just something I had to adjust to and like slow down a little bit. Like the one time I had to go to like the doctor or whatever, I have never sat in a waiting room for so long in my life. Like I was so aggravated about that. But it's like give and take because they have free healthcare, but like the wait is just like so long and everything is written by hand, like all of the reports like at the hospital or like with police. Like some of my cohort got robbed like while they were walking back from like a bar or something, and the police report was done manually. So like the police on one side of the city like would know something because they have it in the records, and then on the other side of the city they don't know because it's not in their system, they don't have like the documents. Like it would be stuff like that. And like on campus, like here at West, if you want to do laundry, you just go online, you put money on your West card, and you go swipe it at the laundry thing. For us, we had to like go to one building to get the card, like the laundry card, go to another place to like put money on it, and then go back to the dorm to do your actual laundry. Everything was just so much more like dragged out in that sense. So that was my only con, just like inconvenience and stuff like that. And then the pros, I would say my main pros were like how central Carnival was to our curriculum because of how important it is to their culture. Like we had a whole class on like the cultural significance of Carnival and like its history and what it's rooted in and why it's so important, and how it's evolved, how it's been like co-opted, how it's been like central to the economy. Like we just learned so much about Carnival. Because most of us came in just thinking it was just like one big street party, everyone is drunk and like half naked and having fun, but like there's so much that goes into it. So I really liked how central they made that to the curriculum. And they paid for everybody's like everyone in our cohorts participation in it. Is really expensive to like take part, to the point where most locals can't even afford to like be in Carnival. They just participate from like the sidewalk. So I really like that the program was able to make sure that all of us were able to participate in it fully. I also like that each semester, every cohort goes on a really educational week-long trip during spring break. So we got to go to Jamaica. We learned a lot every day. Like we had to sit in a lecture at the university we stayed at over there. Every day it was a different lecture. Like we had like a whole 2 days, I think, on Bob Marley. We went to his house turned museum. It was just a lot. And they like factored in excursions and like going out and stuff as well. So we got a really well-rounded like view of the country. It wasn't a tourist experience at all. Like we got to go to a maroon town village. We got to go to like downtown Kingston, the marketplace, everything. We didn't even go to like the more touristy like Montego Bay part until the last day. So I think we got a really good, well-rounded view of it. And lastly, my internship was my main pro as well, because I got to intern with a marketing company in Trinidad called Annex Group. And they basically were just like showing me how they like curate content for their clients. Like for a Trinidadian audience, and some of their clients are like Gatorade, TGI Fridays and stuff like that. And it's just interesting to see how they market to their audience versus how American commercials and stuff are done. So that was really cool as well. Does anybody have any last words about it, or want to go back to any of the questions, or want to add anything? Thank you so much for participating. I really appreciate you guys for making time out of your week. And yeah, you can reach out to me about anything else as well. Thank you, Hannah. And everybody, I hope you have a great night, and thanks for participating.